Hello, guys. Hello, everybody. Today we have a
Oh,
very special guest, Daniel Mateo. We will be talking about finance, international projects, a bit about European projects. So, Daniel, if you don't mind, you can introduce yourself and talk about you a bit.
hello everyone. Thank you, Renan, for inviting me to that interesting podcast. And it's a pleasure to be in that session. We will talk mainly about finance and also some international projects. And I start SAP around 14 years ago. And my last 7, 8 years, I was also doing some project management tasks and focus in rollouts and projects that are either in America or in Europe. And I think that what SAP it's in the last time or in the last years is changing a lot, and there will be new challenge also for the experienced SAP consultants. So in that session, I hope that you enjoy, and we can start with the expert Renan.
Thank you, Daniel. So, you are experienced project manager and you are a renowned consultant in LinkedIn. Lots of people follow your updates and they comment, talk to you about SAP, asking questions. How did you start to get this kind of engagement in LinkedIn? And what do you see as a benefit for being a consultant or project manager to share this information and engage in LinkedIn activities?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started many years ago. Honestly, I don't remember when I started to post in LinkedIn, and my day was just to do one daily post, not by created by myself. So many times there are only other posts that they are either the official from SAP or any other consultants that wants to share some content, and I started just one daily post that I thought that maybe it's relevant, and maybe it was around 3 or 4 years ago once the first S4HANA release started. Yeah, maybe 4 years ago. And since the S4HANA was delivering many new solutions or many new capabilities, the idea was also to focus in what are the changes during those releases. And since each time there are new changes, there are a lot of content to be shared. And I think that sharing content for the community is also helpful for all the SAP consultants, since it's a kind of a strong network, and it helps also in case that you need any help or if you want to get some assistance in any other topics, you can have right or the correct network itself. So in that case, as part of project management, yes, I started also 7 years ago, and in that case, mainly was for finance, but also logistics. And in that case, the important thing for the project is also focus in what are the customer requirements. So the important, or for me, the goal is to satisfy what is the requirements and also deliver a solution that you trust on that, and you think that the customer will be happy with that. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to deliver something that you are not confident with that. And yeah, I think more or less this is just an overview. Now we can go in deep for any other topic that you consider.
Uh, no, I think that's a very interesting topic, talking about the customer expectations and the customer requirements for the projects. What I have seen in lots of cases, customers they are going to S4HANA not because they are doing digital transformation or because they are really wanting to improve process, but because they have a deadline from SAP. So I would just like to know your opinion about that and how you see also in the market. How are the projects you are working and what are usual customer requirements, what they see in this direction?
Yeah, that's right. And in some cases, they are implementing SAP because the neighborhood or because other company has already implemented, and they think that buying just that solution will improve 45% in or will reduce the cost. And they, in most of the cases, there is no any assessment done before. So the important thing before deciding to move to S4HANA or to migrate to some solution to cloud or to define what will be the best ERP to implement, if it's a greenfield implementation or if it's just a brownfield to move to S/4HANA, it's first to do an assessment and identify what are the expectations of the customer to implement the best solution. So it's not always to implement just the S/4HANA and fully with all the modules. There is also other ERPs that can also fit, or some cloud solutions that may help to the customer itself. So the important thing is first identify what are the requirements, what are the goals to move to a new ERP or to go to migrate to the new version. And then is work with them to make sure that they will have the availability for the key users and work together to define a plan that both the technical part, the business, and also the consultants will be able to trust first, and then keep working on that. So if what is the problem? Sometimes they are based in some strategic goals or some legal requirements that they need to change since the deadline is already there, and it's not possible to move forward in that. And what's happening in most cases, neither the business, neither the consultants trust in that data. And what's happening, people are then not confident with that, and then sometimes the product that is finally delivered maybe some time, but with lack of capabilities, and the users are not happy with that. So it's very important to set expectations, define what are the requirements, get all of the requirements in a list, plan, making sure with the availability of the key users, customers, all the different stakeholders that may be required. If you require some training, you need to make sure that during the session of the training, the users for sure needs to be there. There are no other options. So it's important to that. And then with that plan is just a matter to make sure that all of the different stages are being accomplished. Being accomplished.
Yeah, that is certainly some big challenge for most of the companies. And one area where I see lots of struggle usually is that companies, they check the scope items. Sometimes they see what fits. They build their initial idea for the prototype, for the template. But then when they do the rollout for the first country, they already see many roadblocks. They see,
Uh,
okay, it's not so complete. This scope item needs some rework here. We need to do something here. And then for every country they go, they see, okay, here we need amendments. So what is your experience in this area of rolling out SAP? Because one thing is building a template or building a prototype. Usually prototype is always good. Users always love it. But then
yeah,
when we face reality, then we get a ton of new requirements that were never asked before.
yeah, that's true. That happens everywhere. So the template you use, or it's common to define a template with just small entities or with just some uh, companies that maybe you understand the completely flows, but then once you go to the different countries, there are different realities, and in some cases, what's happening that in some entities they are being purchased or they have been purchased maybe in the last month or 1 year ago. So the processes themselves, it's completely different than the expectations from the headquarters itself. So in those cases, the important is before starting the rollout to define if all the processes that the template covers are in the different rollout locations, and then identify all the gaps. So sometimes what we would recommend is to do a fit gap analysis, but with a demo to prepare all the different processes and then display using a demo with the different areas, and then identify within a gap list what are all the different elements that they are not being covered with neither the SAP standard solution or with the template. And then it's just a matter to prioritize all the gaps and make sure that if all of them are blockers or maybe are just nice to have, and define the priorities. And with that, it's very important to work with business to get the approval of the gaps that they will be moving forward. If, for instance, there are 10 gaps and business decide that all the 10 gaps are really necessary, then maybe the plan should be changed. Otherwise, there are not enough time to implement. Or another options that we are also doing is, if there are many gaps, let's do it in phases. So first, we deliver the template with the most critical gaps. And after that, we can mark or we can define a calendar in which the upcoming gaps that are not relevant at all, they will be implemented. Otherwise, you will never implement the solution itself. So, but yeah, it's very important to define all the gaps and at least plan each of the gaps to make sure to have some deadline and follow it. But yeah, in each country, it's for instance, all the legal requirements in South America, it's completely different than in Europe. So there are many different reports, and the way to submit the legal reports to the entities or to the tax authorities, it's completely different than in Europe. That it's much more basic tax procedures. So it's very important to define. And also all the time, all the borders that you need to cross, the different foreign exchange rates, that each country can have different legal specifications. So yeah, it's very important to list all of the requirements and then work with that, a part of the template.
Huh, that sounds like a normal rollout. I usually see in the area, since I also work in the area of finance, I see usually very common discussions. When
Yeah.
we are rolling out to Latin America, there are always discussions on the chart of accounts because there are different taxation rules with different taxes. Some countries don't work with VAT, then you have split three, four different taxes. This is a normal discussion for Latin
Yeah.
America.
And the chart of accounts, to standardize the chart of accounts in case that they had a separate or a completely different ERP, it's a huge task. And sometimes it's not easy. So what is happening maybe in Brazil or in Argentina, they have thousands of different accounts, but in the template you only have 500. So then, in some way, to keep all the legal requirements matching with the template, it's sometimes it requires extra work and a lot of meetings with the finance stakeholders to define what is the correct chart of well, the correct all the chart of accounts that will be more suitable for the branches in Brazil, Argentina, in order to report afterwards in the group uh, with the same chart of accounts, with the same operational chart of accounts. But
That is really a big challenge. I usually see that in the project, this discussion it starts right after the kickoff, and sometimes it goes until UAT. Even near UAT, the chart of account is being changed. New accounts are being created because then they see, okay, this process cannot work with just one. We need to separate these GLs, and also the financial statement version sometimes is a problem because then they update the chart of account but the FSV is not updated on time, and then you try to do reporting, it doesn't work. What
yeah,
other area you think is really always impacted in these kind of projects for finance? Chart of
yeah,
accounts is usually a big one, but there are others, right?
yeah, chart of accounts for sure. It's a big one. And also, as you mentioned, each time that the project is evolving, since you may need to define some automatic processes, either for an exchange rate or some month and closing process for the clearings or for the logistic processes, that they require technical accounts that maybe they have not never used in the previous systems. So then what is happening? You have already defined the processes, but some configuration is missing, and you need then to come back again to the finance and then explain. There are a part of the ones that we have been already agreed. We require 10 or 11 new accounts. One is for the foreign exchange, another for the clearing, another for the fixed asset. So the chart of accounts is always evolving. Meanwhile, you are sometimes in the configuration, and yeah, this is a huge task to align the chart of accounts. But a part of that, related to the tax reports, for me, it's also very difficult since, in case of mainly South America, it requires a lot of legal reports, and sometimes SAP is not covering all of them. It's covering the most important ones, but in some cases, they are not very automatized, or they are not generating the flat file, or the process that they are running is not aligned with the way to get the report. So sometimes related to the payments, or related to all the withholding taxes that are based on payments, are very tricky, depending on how is the process of collections or payments. So it's also important on the tax reports to identify what are the different process that they run, and which are the tax procedures or the different taxes that they need to set up. And a part of that, fixed assets. The fixed assets also are very sometimes critical, since the way of posting in the legal ledger or in the local ledger is completely different than the rules follow in corporate. So it's very important to discuss with them first how to transfer the fixed assets that they currently have to the new fixed assets. So it's important to define the mapping for all the asset classes, define what will be the ways to assign the useful life, if they need to have some specific depreciation method, what is the useful life, or all the details of configuration for fixed assets. That's also something to discuss. And for me, the last point, apart of those ones, is all the banking, all the payments and collections. So what's happened in each country? In Europe, we have the SEPA. So it's more standardized the way to submit all the payments. And there is also for the bank statements, one, two, the MT 940 or the CMMT, that there are standardized files that we can use in Europe. But in South America and even in America, each bank can have a different payment file, and even different payments depending on the method that you are using. And you can have 5, 10 different layouts for each entity. So it's sometimes, if it's not being considered or try to homogenize the banks, it will be a bit difficult tasking the rollouts. So mainly as per considering my experience, are those three big topics.
You said now about the bank statements. I always remember the lockbox in the United States, because then the note to pay never matches, so the reconciliation ends up like 40%, 50% manual work. That is, I think, one of the most complicated I always see.
Yeah, and I remember in some countries, maybe in Central America, that they still use checks. They were printing checks in some very old printer, that you put the paper and it was taking the paper, and you need to make sure that SAP was taking all the lines aligned with the printing paper that you had back, and they want to print all the paychecks for the salary. So it was during the month end, I don't know, 200, 300 checks. And it was always a bit consuming, since each bank has different checks, and it was also a bit
Yeah,
difficult to set
yeah.
up all of those bank checks. But yeah, it's funny, eh? And also the bank statements, how they can get from the bank, it can be interesting as well.
Yes, the checks, and then the check gets stuck in the printer, and then you have
Yeah,
to void numbers, and then the printing becomes a mess. Yeah, this always
yeah.
happens.
Or sometimes jump one paper check to other one, and then you need to cancel 10, 11. But yeah, yeah, it's I don't know. Still, I think they stop, or in the last implementations, they don't use it. But I don't know if it's still common to have in South America printing
Uh,
paper.
it really depends on the country. For example, in Brazil, check nobody uses. I am 30 something and I never signed the check. So that check is something like from 25 years ago. But even in the United States, some companies still use checks for lots of stuff. But in South America, it's really getting less and less because I don't know if people in South America really like digital things, but now like mobile payments, electronic payments, they are taking over everything.
Wherever it is much more faster and way to control it. Otherwise, the checks are a bit difficult to. And then how to try to reconcile with the bank statements. It's difficult at the time that if you have maybe checks that they weren't still get the funds or get the money since 6 months, 7 months. So I know sometimes you release some check, but the employee maybe they still don't go to the bank and they had, or in some company they had even more than 1 year checks without getting the money. So I don't know, for me it's still a bit difficult process to keep track. And the idea is in the rollouts, we recommend to stop using checks and start with wire transfer or the direct debit. So this is the most common ways of payment.
Yes, that is completely true. And I also don't like them so much. And the process of managing checks also complicated in SAP because then if you have to avoid them, cancel them, it's annoying. But yeah, some companies still use, some countries still use. Right now, for example, in Brazil, Brazil implemented not long ago instant payments. That is something that exists for some time in Europe. It's not that popular. Many banks don't accept the instant payments still in Europe, but in Brazil, it took over the consumer market. So
Oh, great. But
operations
then,
from consumers, they are doing like 60% with these instant payments.
but then it's changing
With
from each
companies, it's
bank,
more
no?
difficult because then they need to implement the instant payment in their processes.
I see, I see. But then each bank has a different layout for instant payment.
No, it's a central layout. It's a central API. So the central bank defines the standards, and all banks they are more or less adopting same APIs, same formats for exchanging data. So it was really
Okay.
a centralized project because central bank wanted to modernize payments to have more digital methods and faster processing, and that is more or less working well. In consumer market, it's really popular, so people are just sending money to each other via instant payment, and there is no fee for the transaction. That is also interesting. Most banks just abolished the fees, so you can transfer money instantly with the cell phone, very quick. That's interesting. Right
Great,
now
great,
in
great.
SAP, it's still complicated.
Yeah.
The interfaces for SAP take longer to implement.
I can imagine. I can imagine. But it's already the add-on, the add-on from cash management. It's already connecting to the banks. But I'm not sure if many banks in Brazil are connected to the bank management tool in
No,
SAP.
it's not. It doesn't have still a automatic interface standard from SAP to this API. SAP is supporting some scenarios with sending bank files. The bank file is then processed automatically, but it's still not the API instant process. That is something still some partners are providing services in this area in SAP, but banks, for example, in Brazil, they don't connect with SAP using a PI. They do have dedicated infrastructure. You need to have a service partner to connect to the bank. It's much more complicated. In some countries, you can do PI connection, call the bank API with a IDOC or with an XML file, but that is not happening yet in Brazil, at least, or other South American countries.
I see. Well, maybe in the coming years, I think that they will improve a lot, and yeah, there are a lot of companies there, so there are a huge business in South America. So SAP is making a lot of well, it's making efforts to improve maybe the tax reports and automatize the local or the legal requirements for the different countries.
Yes, that is completely true. Because in fact, one of the areas I work is legal reporting. And I would like to know, have you ever heard about the new solution for SAP, the Advanced Compliance Reporting? It is
No,
already renamed to Document and Reporting Compliance. And the original name was Statutory Reporting Framework. So they already changed the name several times. But it is
no,
a new
honestly
solution
not.
from SAP.
I
It,
saw just a demo and it looks pretty good, but honestly, I haven't implemented that solution. But it looks good. It looks good in a way that it can be transferred in automatic way the tax reports to the tax authorities. But honestly, I'm not sure how difficult it is to implement it or if it's just kind of very easy task. So maybe you can
I
explain.
can. I know. I can say easy task and SAP usually they don't get along together. So depending on the country and the requirements, it's quite complicated. But it's something that addresses one of the points you mentioned. You said that always doing tax reporting, legal reporting was complicated. You had different reports. SAP didn't cover them all. And now with this new solution, they are trying to cover more reports and to have standardized content. So you don't have a different transaction for every country, a different process, different authorization object. Now they have a central cockpit, Fiori apps, and you can manage the at least the extraction of data, creating the report in the same application. That gives, at least for global IT, a better view. They can see all the reports in one app. So they don't need to know 200 transactions in SAP. It's a big
Yeah,
advantage.
no,
And also, SAP worked in the mapping of data, so they
but
are
then
supporting more scenarios.
the customizing, you need to start from scratch. You cannot use the current customizing for withholding taxes and the different VAT codes, or
Ah, it
it's
works in connection with the customizing. So, for example, you are doing VAT report in Germany. You still use, let's say, tax codes from SAP. You still configure your text box to explain what this text code is output, input, and what is connected with that in the, for example, Elster report in Germany. So you still leverage the configuration for the tax configuration and also withholding taxes in countries that have withholding taxes, but then the extraction of data, SAP created new data sources. So they are working with new technologies like CDS views. They created standardized reading of the SAP tables with that data from taxes, withholding taxes, and they build new reports. That is a very interesting area, and it's quite new. SAP released it together with S4HANA, I think it was in 2016, but not right now. Let's see, last year, 2020, it really started to get more attention and to be included really in all studies for S4HANA and new projects, because they are replacing also the reports. So the old reports from ECC, they were mostly still valid in S4HANA, but now they are porting the reports to this ACR solution, document compliance, and in this solution, they are then replacing. The old doesn't get any maintenance anymore. There is one SAP node that tells which reports are supported and not supported anymore. So the idea from SAP is that, okay, moving forward, this will be really the solution for legal reporting. And that
okay.
addresses, yeah, the concern you mentioned. That was always a big discussion in all projects. The legal
Yeah,
reporting, getting the names of the reports, understanding legal requirements in different languages.
yeah, and also the problem is there were, as you mentioned, 10, 20 transactions for only one country, and then how to run in the proper way. Sometimes you need to run first one transaction, then run the second transaction that takes the information from the first one, and then consolidate that, and then the third one to generate the flat file. And sometimes you are not really understanding why you are getting those figures. And then it was always for the month end closing issues with the reporting of taxes. So there are not, there were some differences, and yeah, but I think that with a new solution, that some of the problems will be addressed. And yes, I think also SAP is improving as well the group reporting processes. I'm not sure if you understand or you implement in some rollouts, but now it's getting very popular, and SAP it's pushing to companies move to that solution for consolidation in case that the companies have already moved to S/4HANA. So instead of implementing BPC or any other tool that helps to run the consolidation, if you have, or if the customer have already most of the entities in S/4HANA, then you have already all the finance information in the same database. So you can use that information directly to consolidate in mainly Fiori apps. So it's just to run, there are two different monitors, and those monitors have link to the Fiori apps. So it's much more easier and smooth, and SAP, since it's implemented in the version 18 or 9, I think, 18.10, and after that, it improved a lot, and it's, well, I think it's for the coming implementations. Some companies are deciding to go to that consolidation, and SAP is improving some cloud solutions as well, moving more or the most of the processes into Fiori to make the more user-friendly, or keep the users engaged with more user-friendly activities. As part of controlling as well, there was the universal journal allocation that it contains, instead of using 10, 11 different transactions to run the different allocation cycles. First, to define the cycles, keeping track about them, running the cycles, check what is the results. It was sometimes difficult, and each type of cycle, different transactions. So it was kind of 12, 15 transactions, and now it's simplified in just one Fiori app that you can have all of the different controlling cycles as month end in just 1, 2 clicks. So this is something that SAP is trying to improve. In the coming years, I guess that will be the most convenient way. Since if you remember the first implementations in SAP, there was always a very gray layout, gray blue layout that were not easy to locate anything, and you click enter and you got a lot of errors, and the user sometimes struggle a lot in order to get the information that they require. And with the last versions, if you compare, now with most of them are Fiori applications, so it's much more smoother, and then you can find or define your own homepage or the launchpad as you consider. So it's much more useful.
Interesting. You mentioned group reporting in the beginning and also cost allocation, but I think that group reporting is really one area where I see that lots of companies could benefit, because I have seen large corporations doing kind of consolidation activities outside the system using different BI tools, using the most famous BI tool, Excel. And
Yeah,
this is an area where I see, okay, here if most companies implement, or if companies start to implement, they could really get lots of benefits. It
right.
could evolve.
Yeah, in Europe now there are companies that they are start moving to the group reporting solution, and yeah, that's true that the spreadsheet or the Excel file are the most common way to extract all the information, and then they run their formulas and they get the information. But the idea is group reporting is still quite new, and from my point of view, I think it has still uh, many futures to improve, but SAP is going to the correct or the accurate path. So the system, the best thing is that all the consolidation tasks are done just within the same transaction, and then in case that you purchase the SAP Analytics Cloud, so this is a recommendation by SAP, or implement other reporting capabilities. The group reporting is very powerful, and you can remove all the Excels and then just run either the Microsoft Analytics for Office or the SAP Analytics Cloud, and you can have most of the consolidation reports uh, with your team, and you can share the templates with the different countries, or just keep the templates defined by the core team, and then each country can use or can try to run the templates of the different reports. And that's true that in the coming years it will change. And in this release, there were many changes. A part of the monitor to have more powerful flows, and also make sure that has more flexibility in the configuration of the solution.
Interesting. And but okay, you mentioned lots of new things in the area of group reporting, and you explained it in good details. And but my question would be, how do you know? How do you learn about this group reporting? Is that
Yeah,
something you can do just by reading PDFs, or how do you get to know better the solution?
yeah, that's a good question. So, honestly, I started 2 years ago by myself. So, there are some official documents in help.sap.com that it contains the official information about group reporting, and I purchased some server with the best practices from SAP, and then it was just a self-learning by myself, taking all the manuals and then try to do it in the best practice, and then I create a small entity with two different, well, it was a headquarters with two entities. And I tried to do some postings. And after that, check each of the different processes that group reporting involves, and see how the customizing should be performed. And then I was trying to check each time that there were new release, uh, try to see what are the updates, and try also to work with the server or the demo server having that. And with that, I did some also lectures, and I got some projects about group reporting to implement group reporting in some entities from South America, also some trainings. Some consultants, since in Europe it's nearly new, or not many people know about group reporting, I receive some requests to train about that tool, or even to do some demo and see how is the best approach to implement that solution. But that's true that this solution is changing every time, and maybe in 2 years it's nothing, or it could be a completely new, or the name will change. So, yeah.
Yes, the name will change. That is something we already know. It will change. It's just a constant that is always changing.
Yeah, but for me
But
it's important the self-learning, and always try to have some demo or some server to practice by yourself and see what's the new or the new features, to always keep updated. Since maybe in 3 4 years there will be all of most of the add-ons will be completely different for sure.
yes, that is an interesting topic because I also have my own server. I do my configuration, my tests. I run like a sandbox, do development. I try not to destroy it, but better destroy the test system than a real system. That's always something true. What I noticed recently is that it's getting every time more difficult to do this kind of activities, because now with the BTP and the cloud services, sometimes you need to connect your test server to something on BTP. And then it is really a constraint, because for at least a demo system, you can't do everything. So
That's
group
right.
reporting is not exactly this scenario, but I have lots of scenarios. Oh, to test this, I need a real system, because in my demo system, I cannot connect to the government service or things like that. That's a
Yeah, that's right.
limitation.
That's right. Yeah, as part of the connections, the connectivity. In case of group reporting or other solutions in finance, yeah, that's not a problem since you can build your own sandbox and it's nothing. You can keep your data test there without no problems. But that's true that in other implementations, if you want to have some connectivity with other cloud or with banking services or with any tax authorities, yeah, the sandbox maybe is not needed. Or in some countries, for instance, they have also a sandbox available. So, for instance, Italy, in case of the, or even Spain, with all the invoices that you need to submit by invoice, you have a server that they allow to send just random invoices, but you need an electronic signature, and then it's also kind of complex to implement the electronic signature in the sandbox, and it's not easy at all. And yeah, that's true. That depending on the solution, the sandbox maybe is not the best way, but at least to test or to do the unit testing, the demos, mm, some kind of demos, yeah, it will work fine.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to have the test system. I always talk to my colleagues, or when I give trainings, I always say, yes, you can do a training, you can see the PPT, you can talk to a consultant, but nothing will surpass hands on. If you don't put the hands on the system, it's very difficult to really understand the topics. Sometimes
Right.
when I
And
see a
SAP,
presentation, yeah,
and SAP in the methodology recommends always to do the explore phase. So for that reason, SAP delivers the best practices in all the different environments. And it's for me, it's a must to implement the best practices in the server that you want to do any demo. And then with the customer, do the explore phase to check what is the real output for the process and see how it's in SAP. So in flows or in PPT, it's always powerful. It's very wonderful, and the users are always liking the PPT. So you can put whatever you want, but the time that you access to the system and starts checking that the process needs to, I don't know, open 3 windows, maybe the key user told, why I need to open 3 windows if I only need to input one record. So that's also important. And to identify the process is sometimes what is happening in some experience that I had. You develop a very powerful Fiori app, but it was just done by or defined by some manager or some stakeholder that they don't do the daily operations. And you define the properly solution based on the feedback. He was very happy on that. And then once the key user starts to using it, they told that it's not working. So it's not working since my daily operations is I need always to save a draft since I need to follow many steps and I don't want to lose the input that I have. If I'm not able to save a preliminary document or a draft, it doesn't work. So you develop a very powerful tool, but based on maybe a high level stakeholder that was not aware about the daily operations. And for that, it's always to involve during the explore phase also the key users. Just they will have a very valuable feedback to improve the process.
oh, Yeah, that is true. But one thing you mentioned really got my attention is that aligned with this activate methodology, now we put the hands in the system very early in the project. I remember past projects where it was like 3 months, only PPT, PowerPoint, PDF documents, but no system. And all the discussions in whiteboards, theoretical discussions. And then when you face reality, it strikes you. It's completely different than what you had designed for 3 4 months, and then you lose time.
Yeah, that's right, and it's very important. And SAP in the coming releases, it delivers a lot of best practices, and it's almost ready to go live. So also SAP is having in some options, if you input in some form what is your size of the company, how many processes you may have, the SAP makes you a high level plan to implement the standard solution in base mainly in cloud solutions, but in just weeks, even 6 7 weeks, less than 2 months, 3 months. So SAP is going to implement the best practices and also involve the key users as early as possible to make sure that the solution is covering their needs. And the idea is not wait to have the UATs once all the solution is complete. So in some project, what's happening? You have all the solution. It meets the designs, but the designs maybe was not very detailed. And once you go to the UAT, the solution is not working. But it's not. It's working based on design, but it's not covering the requirements. So then you need to rework a lot. So based on the agile methodology and the SAP Activate, you are improving the process itself, but the core solution should already be tested before starting the design phase. So it's kind of lot of demos, and the users have access to SAP at the very early stage.
Yes, yeah, that is always a challenge with this new methodology. Sometimes the users they see the system at the same time as you.
Yeah, that's right. You need to test 1 week before that.
With the workshop A and workshop B, sometimes the time is really a constraint. If you have everything with the packaged process, things are easier. But when you customize, you change, you redesign, then the time is really complicated to deal with.
That's right. That's right.
And you mentioned with the like the new cloud solutions. Have you ever worked with this as for HANA Cloud, public cloud? I'm really trying to get my hands in it for months, but up to now, so only a private cloud was available in my projects. I didn't really work in the public.
Yeah, I support from an American customer the public cloud implementation. It was a mid-size or a small company in the US, and honestly, for me, it was a change of concept since you are not able to go to the S Pro. So the main finance guys from consultant, you are always going to the customizing, and you want to check what are the steps in customizing. And in the cloud solution, neither you don't have access to check the tables. You are not able to see the SE16N to see the content of the tables. You are not able to. You need to build queries to extract the record. And also the customizing, it's completely different. You need to go by Fiori, and it's kind of reduced. The solution is already delivered, and you have only just the options to define a small part of the process itself. And then you need to make sure that each time SAP is automatically upgrading the system. So you need to forget about that, but maybe the screen is changing. So you are preparing the manuals, and then in the next release, there are new fields, or maybe the
New
Fiori app
apps.
that you are using, it's old, and then you need to use the version 2, and it's two new different repos. So the cloud ones is more challenging. It's changing every time, and for me, I learn a lot. But honestly, I see that it's kind of pre-pack. You have all the package already there, and then it's just kind of activate some functionalities, define some kind of entries in Fiori, but it's not having the flexibility as the on-premise or the private cloud. But
Yes,
for
that's
small companies, yeah, it can be a good option. So you can implement it in a couple of months. So it's very fast implementation.
yes, but what I have seen, I checked a lot about that. I still didn't get a project with the public cloud. I was checking it from my company. We have one public cloud instance for test system, and that is really funny. I think sometimes it's easier to train a new consultant to do the implementation in the public cloud than me, because I'm used to S-Pro, to creating new GL accounts, to changing things that are not changeable anymore.
Yeah, it's very reduced. And for me, the most important thing is to check the tables. I want to check I don't know, some detail for the customer. And then what's the problem? You cannot get access to the tables. And if you go to the Fury report, maybe the Fury report only display 5 characteristics, and you want to get another one. And then it's not in the same way as before. So you need to get trained to it and build your own queries to get the information itself. But I think SAP is improving a lot as part of the cloud solutions, and the future will be based on that in those implementations. And the private cloud, I think it's also good options. The public cloud, I recommend mainly for small companies or that they want to keep all the standardized processes in SAP. But private cloud maybe can be also for
Wow.
big companies.
Yeah,
Can be
private cloud I have seen. To be honest, I think the last projects I have done were all private cloud. So it seems that really installing servers and managing your servers is really getting outdated, and now everybody wants to outsource that. And that's a good thing. The private cloud, I think it works basically the same scope as on premise, but you have the advantage of having a cloud provider taking care of all the infrastructure. That is something I really like the idea. I was never a big fan of having to install the system and support some activities in the installation. So having a cloud partner for that part is not always nice.
yes, no, that's right. And you save a lot of money for infrastructure, so you don't need to have all the servers and taking care about the servers. Big companies are moving forward to that solution. Let's see in the future. At the time that maybe we are talking, there will be a new a new process, or yeah, but for sure, the on-premise implementations will be decreasing, and the cloud solutions will be improving, and some companies will
Yeah,
move
that
to.
is true. Probably during the time of our conversation, SAP already released new BTP services, new Fiori apps. The government's changed the tax rates in 10 countries, and
This.
things that they never stop changing now. So, how would you recommend for consultants to follow updates and to get to know these new changes from SAP? What do you have in mind that you can recommend for
Yeah,
new consultants or even old consultants that need to be recycled like me?
yeah, that's a good point. Is there are a lot of new changes, and sometimes it's not clear what are the changes, and the documents that you are getting is what are the scope items that have been changed from that release to that release. So SAP, what is delivering is each time that there is a new release, it contains all the scope items or all the different items that have been changed. But what's the problem? That this is all the most updated items, and it's 300 pages, and uh, you are only having the changes in that release, but maybe you are updated, and since 1809 you have five releases meantime. So if you follow the SAP official information, maybe it's sometimes difficult to follow. So in my case, what I recommend is in the Fiori library apps. There is the website, the official website. It contains all the Fiori apps that are available for each different releases. And then you can go there and look for by area, maybe finance or by cash collections, tax reports. And then you get the list for all the Fiori apps. And you can click the Fiori app and it's displaying since which version is available and what are the main functionalities for that release. From one side, I recommend check the Fiori library apps only for Fiori. So if you want to get what is the most updated Fiori apps based on some area, you can go there. And the other is check the blogs. There are a lot of good people or good profiles that share videos or even blogs in the official blog blogs.sap.com that contains more easy way the changes in the different areas. So if you go in that way in that website and you filter by tax, by finance, and you add the release, you can get even detailed by tax reports or by mm, those ones, and it's very powerful itself. I use also to post some documents that I found that they can be helpful. But yeah, the important thing is to have time. So the problem is there are a lot of sources, and yeah, if you are starting, I remember when I start, there was no information about anything. You get one book that was in English, or if you are lucky, if it was not in German, and there was pictures, but without any explanation, and it was once you want if you want to get trained in SAP 15 years ago, it was either you need to pay some official training classes or there was not many information available in the internet. So, but now the problem I think is the opposite. There are as many information that you need to focus in what is important. But I think that also OpenSAP is doing a good task in have an overview for most of the different areas of interest, but also in Blocks app or Fiori app, in the Fiori library app. For me, it's also more practical to you can click, see what's the changes, and mainly that's the
Oh,
option.
cool. Lots of different sources. And you're right. In the past, it was quite complicated. I remember when I started to make, after a few months, I started to make blog posts in the CP community because in my
Okay.
topic, there was basically nothing. There were like two, three guys posting something, but the documentation was really scarce in the area. And nowadays, help portal evolved a lot. SAP is also development team and product team. They are posting blogs and trying to get more people to know the solutions and the new documentation they are building. That area is really growing a lot in SAP, and that's
Yes.
good because
And
with the
also,
amount of changes, if we don't get information, we get crazy.
yeah, and also the official help by SAP, the help.sap.com. There are a lot of powerful sources, and you can filter by which version you want and which areas of interest you want, and then you have all the information. The problem is the time. Maybe there are a lot of pages and a lot of sources, but yeah, it's just a matter of
Yes,
dedicate some
yes.
hours every day.
Yeah, and I think that's why also we have now good instructors and good trainings because then some people is really taking the time to read that, compile, to create some new content, and to make it also easy to consume. Because if you have 100 sources and you try to check them out, it's complicated. So that's an area where I see lots of also services for trainings appear new consultants sharing knowledge or sharing trainings in these areas in different platforms. So not only from SAP, but also from the community, from the market itself.
Right, right, right. No, and in LinkedIn, there are also really nice profiles that they are sharing a lot of knowledge. I tried also to do some summarize or to post some daily posts, but there are other profiles that they are official SAP managers that they are doing a good job in sharing a lot of videos and very helpful content with the new releases.
Yes, and I would like to thank you for the time. We are more or less 1 hour already talking, and the time
Oh,
really flies when you are
yeah.
having this kind of conversation. Really good. And what would you say for people that want to know more or want to follow you? What do you how they can get in touch, or what areas you would be keen also to cooperate, provide trainings and services? Can you comment a bit about that?
Sure, yes. Well, first, thank you, Renan, for the time to have you just 1 hour, but for me, it was like a 10 minutes. I thought 1 hour it would be very, but no, no, it was very fun conversation. And yes, in my case, just a summary. Well, in case of LinkedIn, I'm usually posting some daily information about mainly finance, logistics, but in case if some specific training for mainly S4HANA, group reporting, or revenue accounting and reporting, that they are kind of new areas in SAP, and in Europe they are not still so extent. So I will be glad to reach me via LinkedIn or any train, well, any specific task that may be interested. For me, it will be a pleasure. And I think that's all from my side.
Also, you got a thank you from Manuel.
Oh,
Eh,
that's a friend from Portugal. From Brazil, sorry.
Okay, then thank you, Danielle, for taking the time today. And probably we will stay in touch. Keep sharing content about SAP. That's always good to have. And
Sure.
thank you
And
guys
thank you
for
very much.
watching.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye bye.